Today you're going to learn a powerful sound that has been used for centuries. When you practice it correctly, something within you shifts. This isn't magic. It's the science of vibration and focused attention. The sound you're about to discover comes from ancient meditation traditions, used by practitioners throughout history, because it creates a specific resonance in your awareness. And when that resonance builds, your inner state transforms. The mind settles, the heart opens, and your perception begins to clarify. It's not about believing anything mystical. It's about experiencing what this focus practice does for your nervous system in the first few moments. But stay present. If you leave before completing the practice, you'll miss the precise moment when this technique integrates into your awareness and begins creating lasting change. You only need to learn this once. Just one proper session, one complete practice, and you'll have a tool for life. So breathe deeply now, because what's about to be shared will resonate within your consciousness for a long time. You grew up learning that you need to struggle, to force, to chase after what you want. Your whole life, you were taught that more effort equals better results. But there's a level of consciousness where things don't work that way. In this space, it's not you who forces the answers. It's awareness that allows them to emerge. It sounds counterintuitive, I know, but there are moments when something shifts quietly in your mental state, and certain insights that once felt unreachable suddenly become clear. They weren't hidden in the world. They were waiting for you to reach the right state of receptivity, and when that state is achieved, everything reorganizes. Ancient traditions called this the point of inner remembering. It's when your awareness reaches such a specific quality that deeper knowing begins to surface. These aren't memories of facts. They're remembrances of being. Remembrances of what your deeper self has always known but had been dormant. And that's why this video appeared for you. It's not the algorithm. It's not chance. It's readiness. Your consciousness reached the threshold to receive this type of information. It's as if you've unconsciously prepared yourself without realizing it. The most interesting part, you didn't choose this with your thinking mind. This process happens before logic kicks in. You didn't reason your way here. You intuited your way here because this kind of content only appears when awareness is ready. Not because it's secret, but because it's subtle. And it can't be transmitted carelessly because its practice affects deep layers of consciousness. When you encounter this information, something begins to stir within you. But it's not about believing or intellectualizing. It's about letting your body recognize what your mind doesn't yet have language for. And that recognition is powerful. Maybe you'll feel a subtle shift in your breathing, or a gentle warmth in your chest, or an unexplainable desire to continue even if you don't know why. These are signs that your nervous system is already beginning to attune. But understand, this kind of practice doesn't respond to casual curiosity. It only responds to genuine presence. If you're here just with your analytical mind, it might feel abstract, disconnected. But if you're here with your whole being, body, heart, and awareness, then everything starts to make sense. This isn't knowledge you find just anywhere, because it isn't stored in books. It's encoded in practice, and practice emerges when you stop forcing. You don't access this by trying to understand it intellectually. You access it by allowing yourself to feel. The mind wants to analyze, the heart simply recognizes, and it's in that recognition that true understanding happens. You didn't arrive here because you pushed doors open. You arrived here because your awareness touched readiness. And when that happens, certain practices that were dormant in human tradition begin to emerge as if they were just waiting for someone to tune in to the right frequency. And that frequency is your natural state of presence. But now a new challenge presents itself. It's not enough to access this state, you have to sustain it. And that's exactly where most people encounter difficulty. It's in that exact moment, subtle and almost imperceptible, that a quiet obstacle slips into awareness. It doesn't come in dramatically. It doesn't announce itself with noise or resistance. It settles like a gentle breeze, like an undercurrent that seems harmless at first. But over time, it begins to erode the foundation of even the most dedicated meditation practice. And the most challenging part is that it doesn't act from outside in, it acts from inside out, like an emotional pattern running in the background. You might be following every instruction perfectly. You might be meditating every morning, practicing breathing techniques with discipline, repeating affirmations, creating sacred space, maintaining healthy routines. On the surface, everything looks right. But inside, something doesn't align, because this obstacle doesn't sabotage directly. It sabotages through inconsistency. It acts like lukewarm water flowing through the cracks of a practice not yet consolidated. And little by little, everything fades. You feel like you're progressing, but you keep returning to where you started. You dedicate yourself. You feel your state elevate for a while, and suddenly everything seems to collapse again. The peace that felt anchored dissolves, the confidence evaporates, clarity turns to confusion, and then frustration sets in. But I did everything right. Why doesn't it seem to work? The answer isn't on the surface. It's in the hidden layer of consciousness, in the actual emotional content that underlies the practice. Because practice alone doesn't sustain anything. It's just the container. What truly sustains transformation is the genuine emotional presence vibrating beneath the technique. It doesn't matter if you say, "I am at peace," if deep down you feel anxious inside. What your nervous system registers isn't the phrase. It's the emotional reality echoing between the words. It's what you actually feel while you speak. That's why so many powerful affirmations seem ineffective. You can repeat, "I am confident," 1,000 times a day. But if when you say it, your body contracts, your stomach tightens, your breath becomes shallow, that's what your system picks up on. Your nervous system doesn't respond to surface-level intention. It responds to emotional coherence between what is said, what is felt, and what is held in the body. And the most challenging part, this isn't visible to the thinking mind. It's a non-verbal language. It's unrecognized micro-emotions. Old shame disguised as confidence. Suppressed fear under the mask of positivity. Anger that was never acknowledged, dressed up as forced gratitude. It's like trying to plant seeds in soil that looks fertile, but deep down is still hardened by unprocessed emotions. And then even if the intention is beautiful, the practice doesn't take root. That's the real blind spot of inner work. The illusion of growing when in fact you're just memorizing phrases, adding more mental control, getting further away from authentic feeling. That's why so many dedicated practitioners still struggle internally. Because if the real emotion isn't acknowledged, the nervous system doesn't integrate. You don't embody what you say. You embody what you feel at the exact moment you say it. That difference changes everything. It doesn't help to say, "I forgive," if your breath still trembles. It's ineffective to say, "I am peaceful," with tense shoulders, clenched jaw, tight chest. The body doesn't lie, and awareness doesn't negotiate with inconsistency. It's like trying to tune an instrument while it's being played. You need to stop, listen, adjust. Only then can you play again, and that's when the sound changes. That's why before any technique, any mantra or sacred sound, there's something more important. The pause, the moment of stillness where you listen to your own inner state. The point where you feel the emotion before trying to reprogram it. The breath before the words. The presence before the sound. That's where real transformation is born. And that transformation is cultivated in an internal space that almost no one visits. The gap between what you want to feel and what you're actually feeling. That's the gap we're going to work with now. Because before creating a new inner state, you have to inhabit the present moment with complete emotional honesty. And that starts with a simple internal adjustment that completely shifts awareness before a single word is spoken. But what almost no one realizes is that most people fail at the most subtle point. They rush to the technique, the affirmation, the sound. They think the power is in the mantra, the sequence, the perfectly pronounced mystical word. But they forget the essential, the preparation of the instrument. Because before the sound comes the field of awareness, before the word comes the silence, before the chant comes the awakened body attuned to truth. It's like trying to play a symphony on an out-of-tune instrument. You can follow all the notes, respect the sheet music perfectly, even be moved by the intensity. But still the sound comes out distorted, misaligned. Not because you did it wrong, but because the instrument wasn't ready to resonate at that frequency. And in inner work, that instrument is you. Your body is the first temple. Your breath is the first prayer. Your inner attention is the first offering. Resonance doesn't start when you speak. It starts much earlier. It starts the moment you choose to be present. And that moment needs to be cultivated. There is a subtle adjustment, a simple sequence almost imperceptible to the rushing mind, but deeply felt by aware consciousness. That's where the silent practice becomes powerful. You sit, release the weight from your shoulders, connect your feet to the ground, align your spine like a vertical channel between earth and sky, and you breathe. But not just any breath. You inhale slowly and deeply through your nose, feeling the air touch the inner walls of your nostrils, gently moving down into your abdomen. No rush, no control, just like you're inviting the breath of life in. Then you hold it briefly, feeling time pause for a moment inside your body and exhale through your mouth softly, as if releasing old tension, stored stress, thoughts that no longer serve you. In that moment, with your eyes still closed, you bring 2 fingers to the center of your chest and place them there, a gentle, circular, silent touch. But this gesture carries more than physical contact. It's an awareness anchor, a seal of presence, a call back to your center. It's like saying, I'm here ready to practice with truth. That point in the center of your chest is where the essence of being pulses. It's the seat of coherence between what is felt, what is lived, and what is expressed. And by touching it with awareness, something awakens. You start to sense the resonance before the word. Before you vocalize, you feel. Before you emit, you align. And here's the principle that ancient practitioners knew. Feeling before speaking is the true beginning of transformative practice. It's not about thinking or repeating. It's about allowing. You allow the resonance to arise from within as a response from your inner field, not as a forced mental command. And in that instant, everything changes. You notice there's a gentle, almost shy resonance rising from the center of your chest. It's not an emotion. It's not an idea. It's a calling. It's like your essence saying, now I'm ready. That conscious touch activates a subtle field of coherence. And that coherence generates a resonance that exists before any sound. It doesn't need words to exist. It's already happening. And this is the most overlooked point in modern meditation practices. Without this initial alignment, any technique becomes mechanical repetition. Any affirmation becomes noise. But when you align the body, quiet the mind, and touch the true resonance before speaking, your awareness reorganizes. Your presence changes. The inner field responds. And then when you finally vocalize, the word won't just be sound, it will be living force. Speech becomes healing. The word becomes a bridge. The resonance becomes a mirror where consciousness recognizes itself in you. And that's where the next question arises. How do you sustain that living frequency? How do you keep that resonance stable if your body is still misaligned in its fundamental centers? The answer lies in 3 specific points in your body. 3 natural centers that need to be activated together. And almost no one has taught you how to align them. And this is where everything begins to align, like pieces of a great awareness puzzle hidden in plain sight all along. Because no matter how much you breathe with intention, focus on the present moment, or even chant the sound with devotion, if the energetic foundation supporting that emission isn't intact, the whole field becomes unstable, and the sound, instead of creating coherence, dissipates. Ancient traditions spoke clearly. The sacred sound is not a one-dimensional event. It isn't limited to the throat, to the air that vibrates, or to mental intention. True sound is three-dimensional. It is born from the convergence of three power centers that, when aligned, form a direct bridge between the individual and universal consciousness. This is not symbolic, it's practical awareness technology. 3 points, 3 centers, 3 pillars. The first is the lower abdomen, more precisely the energy center, known as the lower dantian or hara, the internal furnace. This is where raw vital energy rests, a primordial energy still formless but full of creative power. All manifestation begins here. It is the point where intention gains substance, where the spark of creation is conceived. It represents the foundation, the root, the first impulse of sound before it becomes sound. And without it, any emission loses structure. It's like trying to build a temple with no foundation. The second point is the heart. And we're not talking about the physical organ, but the awareness center that acts as a purity filter. It doesn't emit brute force, but quality of presence. If the abdomen provides the sound with power, the heart is what colors it with truth. This is where the emotional resonance of being lives. When this center is active, the sound gains depth, soul, emotional authenticity. It's where energy stops being just force and becomes presence. And the third center is the throat, not as an isolated point, but as a passageway. The throat is the channel of expression, the place where the invisible becomes sound, where everything that was conceived in the hara and refined in the heart is transformed into vibration, word, audible sound. But there is a principle here that few understand. The throat is conditional. It creates nothing on its own. It only reveals. It only releases what already exists as coherent resonance in the centers below. When these 3 points are connected, something extraordinary happens. The entire body becomes a single channel of expression. There is no more separation between what you feel, what you create, and what you express. Abdomen, heart, and throat align like a living spiral that runs through your being from bottom to top, emitting such coherent resonance that the surrounding field responds naturally. Ancient traditions called this the triple pillar of the living word, and it's not optional. If you activate only one of the centers, the sound comes out fragmented. If 2 centers work, there is resonance, but without full impact. Only when all 3 operate together does the practice become a real transformative tool capable of shifting patterns, dissolving mental noise, and opening pathways of true presence. And this is the part almost no one discusses, because many speak only with the throat and their words sound hollow. Others feel deeply with the heart but can't express what they feel. And there are those who activate the creative impulse of the abdomen but don't refine it with the truth of the heart. The result, distorted frequency, disconnected communication, intention without effect. But when you vocalize with your whole being, when the sound is born from the hara, rises through the heart, and emerges through the throat as unified breath, the field around you enters active listening. Your nervous system responds. The awareness web recognizes you, and there's no more separation between sound, body, and consciousness. That's why the preparation for the practice doesn't start with the voice. It starts with the silent activation of these 3 centers. And this activation is what you're about to do now. Not with sound, but with presence. A silent ritual, a deep listening, an inner connection that awakens the triad. Because only those who awaken all 3 centers can truly be heard by their own deeper awareness. The preparation has been done. The centers have been acknowledged. Now what comes next doesn't require force. It requires surrender. Because before any sacred sound is emitted, something has to happen within. It's not something you see. It's not something you hear with your ears. It's something you feel as an inner whisper, a resonating silence, as if your entire being withdraws for a moment just to listen to what has always been there waiting to be heard. This is the moment of the silent ritual. And contrary to what many think, silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of listening. It's when you step away from external noise and into the listening of your own frequency. This silence is active. It pulses. And within it the real alignment happens. You sit comfortably with your spine upright but not rigid. Your eyes can be closed or gently open as if ready to sense something beyond ordinary perception. Then the breath begins, but not just any breath. It's a triangular breath. You inhale counting to 4, hold the air for another 4, and exhale also for 4 counts. This rhythm creates a structure in awareness. It's like drawing an invisible triangle between the centers of your body, and this triangle is the key. With each breath cycle, your attention moves. On the inhale, your attention goes to the abdomen. On the hold, it rises to the heart. On the exhale, it lifts to the throat. Then the cycle begins again. You don't force it. You observe. The attention is gentle but steady. It doesn't press the centers. It acknowledges them. And as you do this, something begins to take shape in the inner space. A silent geometry, a triangle of awareness begins to form within your consciousness. In the center of your chest, you sense this light pulsing, not as a still image, but as a living resonance, expanding and contracting like a cosmic heart within you. This triangle pulses in rhythm with your breath. It's not just visual. It resonates. And by holding this state for a few minutes, you notice something rare. The body aligns, the mind settles, emotion stabilizes, and the 3 centers become a single instrument. It's like you become a human tuning fork. Every cell begins to resonate in harmony, preparing the field to receive something greater. The sound hasn't come yet, but everything is already being tuned for it. This is the true beginning, not in the sound, but in the silence that comes before. Because when that inner triangle resonates in coherence, what comes out of your mouth is not just sound. It's encoded vibration. And that's why ancient practitioners kept this ritual sacred, because they knew that without this silent alignment, the sacred sound would be just empty repetition. But when done with truth, with presence, with surrender, the sound reorganizes everything inside you. Now the question arises like a call. What is this sound? What is the resonance that ancient traditions revealed and that touches parts of you that you didn't even know existed? And then, at the peak of silence, it emerges, not as an external sound, but as a memory rising from within, a resonance that seems to recognize you before it's even spoken. This is the sound. But it's not just any sound. It's a awareness key refined over centuries, passed down in silence among those who committed to protecting it. Because it doesn't belong to ordinary vocabulary. It's not meant for conversation. It's meant for awakening. Ancient traditions taught it with precision, not for its meaning, but for its transformative impact. It was the sound that reorganized the centers, that activated the soul's hidden field, and that echoed through the invisible structure of consciousness. This sound crossed civilizations. It was practiced in temples hidden beneath stone, whispered in deserts, guarded by lineages that don't appear in books. And now it has returned. Not because someone brought it, but because your awareness reached the exact point where it could be recognized. This sound is Har. 2 syllables, simple, but charged with transformative power. Ha is the primordial breath. It's the beginning, the activation, the air that becomes energy. When pronounced with presence, it awakens the abdomen, and releases stagnant life force. Ra is the solar spark. It's the resonance that moves from the center outward. It's the pulse of manifested creation. It touches the heart and passes through the throat like a living current. Together, they form a code that doesn't depend on belief, language, or culture. It depends on only one condition: being spoken with a living body, with aligned emotion, with pure intention. Because it's not about vocalizing beautifully. It's about resonating fully. It's about making every cell participate in the sound. Not like a performance, but like a unified field. That's why this sound can't be taught like a song. It must be felt before it is expressed. That's why many have heard it, but few have activated it. Because real activation doesn't come from copying the sound, but from allowing it to move through you like a wave that finds its exact point of resonance. Now you've heard it, but you haven't spoken it yet. And that makes all the difference, because when you vocalize it the way it was taught in ancient traditions, the field changes, the body responds, and the resonance that was dormant begins to expand. In the next part, you're not just going to listen, you're going to practice. You'll pronounce this sound with an awakened body. And when that happens, something that has been silent inside you for a long time will no longer be able to stay quiet. This is the moment that can't be watched. It can't be understood with rational thought. It's a moment that can only be entered with your whole body present, with your heart awake, your soul open, and silence as your guide. Because here the practice stops being an idea and becomes embodied resonance. But pay attention, chanting the sound har is not a performance. It's not to impress. It's not to seem mystical, enlightened, or special. It's to become present, to empty yourself completely, and let the sound do what it needs to do. Chanting har is an act of surrender, of offering, of communion. There is no right or wrong, only presence, only listening, only resonance. Sit the way a sacred temple rests upon the earth, grounded but without tension. The spine should be alert like a vertical channel. The top of the head soft like an open flower. The feet touching the ground like subtle roots that breathe. The hands rest naturally on the knees or together at the center of the chest, like a seal of inner silence. Now close your eyes. Let the external world fade away without effort. And then begin the triangular breath. Inhale deeply. Hold gently. Exhale with awareness. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Each cycle activates the resonance triangle that exists between the abdomen power center, the heart connection center, and the throat expression center. It's a living architecture. And this triangle needs to be awake so that the sound can move through you like a beam of clear light. But before vocalizing anything, listen. Listen as if something were whispering from deep within your center, as if the sound were already resonating in you, just waiting for your permission. Not with your physical ears, but with your whole field. Feel the calling rise not from outside, but from your own silence. And when it comes, let the sound be born from the center of the abdomen, expand through the heart, move through the throat, and rise through the head like a river of sound light. And then vocalize with full surrender, har. No force, no rush, no mental interference, as if you were exhaling an ancient memory that's always been stored inside. The sound comes out, but it's not just air vibrating in the vocal cords. It's energy resonating through every layer of your being. You feel your spine activate, a subtle warmth spreads between the vertebrae, an expansion in the chest as if something clicked into place. And right after the sound dissolves, a special silence descends, a full silence, a silence that pulses. In that instant, something inside you recognizes this is not just a sound. It's a key. It's an awareness code. It's a transformative command that tells your nervous system that you've returned to your center. And the system responds. But that response won't come through words or visible signs. It comes as an internal reorganization, as a field that settles around you to keep you whole. It's in that moment that many make a mistake without realizing it. They feel the power of the sound, but they don't seal the practice. They don't close the spiral. And without the final seal, the energy dissipates. It does its work for a moment, but then fades away. It's like lighting a candle and leaving it in the wind. It releases light, but goes out quickly. That's why ancient traditions taught that every practice needs a completion, a synthesis phrase, a sound that seals, anchors, structures, and sustains what was activated. This sound doesn't come first. It can only be revealed after the field is fully coherent. And you've come this far by awareness merit. You aligned the centers. You prepared the field. You listened. You chanted. And now only one step remains. A forgotten sound that completes the transformative circuit. A sound that, when chanted the right way, not only anchors the frequency, but begins to restructure your awareness permanently. And that's what will happen in the next part. The resonance expanded. The sound crossed dimensions. For a few seconds it felt like everything was suspended, like time had stopped, like the world listened along with you. But it's exactly in that moment of fullness that many consciousnesses get lost. Not from a lack of sensitivity, but from a lack of structure. They feel the field open, but don't know how to keep it open. They feel the heartbeat stronger, but don't know how to protect that rhythm from the shock of returning to ordinary consciousness. It's like someone discovering fire for the first time and leaving it exposed to the wind, because the challenging part isn't lighting it, it's keeping it lit. And this is where the forgotten part comes in, the awareness seal. Most practice with devotion, feel something deep, a warmth in the chest, a lightness in the mind, a real connection. But soon after they return to mental noise, back to distractions, back to old layers of doubt, fear, and reactivity. Not because they don't trust what they experienced, but because they didn't know how to anchor the experience. Every resonance needs grounding. Without roots, the field dissipates. Without a seal, the frequency fades. That's why after the sacred chant of Har, when the field is still resonating and the soul is present, something essential must happen, the conscious sealing of the energy. In this moment you remain silent, but it's no longer the empty silence from the beginning. It's a charged silence, alive, full of the resonance you just activated. The eyes are closed, the mind is calm, the body receptive. And then from the center of the chest, you speak a phrase, not with your mouth, but with your awareness. 3 times, with reverence, with presence, with truth. I am the resonance that emanates from the 0 point. I am the resonance that emanates from the 0 point. I am the resonance that emanates from the 0 point. This is not mechanical repetition. It's a transformative declaration. It's as if you were sealing with your own essence the new frequency that was awakened. This phrase doesn't come from the mind. It comes from the point of origin, from the internal space where everything is pure, untouched by time or ego, from the 0 point. That point isn't physical. It's not somewhere in your body. It's a field, a state, an origin frequency. And when you declare that you are the resonance that emanates from this point, you are telling life that you don't just want to touch that state. You want to embody it. You want to sustain it. You want to integrate it as your new awareness pattern. And the effect of that is real. Something starts to organize internally. The resonance doesn't just stay. It begins to structure itself. It descends from experience into the emotional body. It starts to redesign how you feel, how you think, how you act. It's as if the field has grown roots inside you. And that grounding is what separates a deep experience from a fading memory. But here also begins the real test, because sealing the resonance is easy in silence. What's challenging is sustaining it when chaos begins. When the world starts demanding again, when notifications don't stop, when reactive people trigger you, when stress shows up disguised as routine. It's at that point that many lose the frequency, not because it wasn't activated, but because they didn't know how to protect it. They didn't learn how to create an internal space where it could stay alive even when everything outside is in disorder. And it's exactly here that the most important question of the journey arises. How do you sustain that resonance even when reality keeps trying to pull you back? How do you stay in the 0 point when the whole world seems out of balance? That answer isn't external. And that's what you're about to access now. You sealed the resonance. You felt the expanded field. But now life continues. The traffic doesn't disappear, and the demands don't stop. Old emotions try to return. And this is where everything is defined. Because resonating highly is not about hiding from the world. It's about staying whole within it. True high frequency is not an ecstatic state far from reality. It's steady presence in the middle of the storm. It's silent alignment even when everything around is chaotic. Above all, it is coherence. Coherence with what you activated, with what you felt, with what you chose to sustain. Ancient traditions said, the most powerful resonance is the one that remains in silence when chaos tries to create noise. And for that, there are 4 fundamental pillars. Radical presence. To be here fully, not just with the body, but with attention. To feel the breath, the heartbeat, the space between thoughts, without judgment, without resistance. Because only in the now can the field stay active. The past distorts, the future fragments, the present anchors, conscious speech. Every time you speak, you emit a resonance, not just with sound, but with the intention it carries. Speaking without awareness breaks the field. Speaking with truth strengthens it. Every phrase you say should be a reflection of the resonance you want to sustain. Creative silence. You don't need to make sound all the time. Silence, when conscious, is one of the most powerful forms of frequency maintenance. It's in silence that energy organizes. It's where resonance settles into the body, integrates into the system, and roots into the field. Contact with nature. This is the simplest and most direct form of frequency reset. Trees, flowing water, earth are natural portals of resonance. When your frequency starts to waver, all it takes is a true connection with nature for realignment to happen effortlessly, without ritual, just presence. These 4 pillars work as invisible supports. They don't make noise. They don't require beliefs. They just ask for consistency. And if you apply only this, you'll already feel the difference. The resonance will last longer. Returning to frequency will be easier. The body will begin to recognize this state as natural. But even among those who practice all this with dedication, there's still an unrevealed principle. A 5th pillar. Almost no one talks about it because it's not a behavior, it's a shift in perception. It was taught by ancient traditions in hidden passages, passed only to dedicated practitioners. And it deeply alters how you relate to time, the body, and what's real. Ancient wisdom said, true frequency does not operate inside linear time. It needs a different awareness space. Sacred sound does not resonate in the past nor in the future. It only happens outside the count, in the space where the now becomes absolute. And this is where the 5th pillar appears. This pillar is not practiced like the others. It doesn't involve behavior or external routine. It depends on a shift in perception. You have to leave the prison of time and enter the windows of the eternal present. These windows are what the ancients called awareness intervals, short but deep moments where time seems to stop. But it's not the outside world that slows down. It's you who steps out of the fast flow and into a field where everything is now. You've probably felt this. A sudden silence between 2 thoughts. A pause between one breath and the next. A moment when time seems suspended, even if just for 2 or 3 seconds. That's exactly where the fifth pillar lives. It's in these invisible spaces that your resonance reconnects. Because there nothing pressures you. There the mind doesn't project. There the body doesn't react. There everything just is. And what ancient traditions taught is that you can create these spaces consciously throughout the day, between tasks, words, breaths. You can enter this sacred time. Just stop. Breathe. Close your eyes. Drop your shoulders. Feel the now as if it were eternal. These pauses don't need to last long, but they need to be complete. 3 seconds of total presence are worth more than an hour of disconnected practice. You start creating small windows of eternity within the routine of time. And every time you do this, something inside you reorganizes, as if the field returns to 0 point. These moments not only sustain the activated resonance, they enhance it. Because in the time of now, resonance doesn't have to face resistance. It simply spreads. It fills the field. It becomes you. And something even more powerful happens. If you vocalize the sacred sound within one of these windows, the effect is not the same. It's not just deeper. It's as if the sound gains another dimension. As if it touches not just the body, but the space around it. And this is what we'll explore next. And when you chant the sound within one of these awareness windows, with the centers activated, the breath aligned, and the field in silence, something truly begins to happen. But not in the spectacular way the mind expects. There are no lights, explosions, or dramatic manifestations. No voices from the sky or mystical visions taking over your body. What is revealed is more subtle, more quiet, and infinitely more powerful. It's as if a presence begins to resonate around you, but not an external presence. It's the field, the real field, the one that responds, that hears, that mirrors. You start to notice micro-adjustments happening in the invisible. People around you who seemed emotionally closed begin to listen to you differently. Eyes change, expressions soften, spaces that once felt tense begin to open with unexplainable ease. Conversations flow effortlessly. Decisions that felt stuck come naturally. Situations that dragged on for months begin to resolve like dominoes falling into place. It's not coincidence, and it's definitely not imagination. It's pure awareness response. It's as if you had touched a silent string, and consciousness was echoing back in a melody that can only be heard by those who've learned to resonate with the soul. Because this sound, when spoken with truth, with coherent intention, with living breath and emotion in the right place, doesn't stop at you. It reverberates. It passes through you. And after it passes through, it expands. It crosses space. It touches frequencies. It opens pathways that were closed not because of lack of worth, but due to misalignment. And when that misalignment disappears, reality responds as if it had been waiting for that signal all along. This movement cannot be manipulated. It cannot be forced because it is born from coherence, from the purity of your resonance, not the expectation of your mind. You are not asking, you are not begging, you are becoming. Becoming a new center of emission, a new nucleus, a new point of origin. It's as if the field around you starts to reorganize around a new gravitational center. You, or rather the you, that emits the original sound from the 0 point. And the most beautiful part is that this requires no effort. This new resonance doesn't need to be held up by your willpower. It sustains itself because it is rooted in truth, in stillness, in the inner sound you released and now keeps resonating even in silence. And it's at this point that subtle transformation begins. The things you needed to align simply do. The people you wanted to reach simply feel. The places where you felt out of sync now welcome you, but even with all of that happening, it's still only the surface. Because the real power of this ancient practice is not in the sound you made. It's in the one you no longer need to make. It's in the sound that resonates even when your lips are closed. In the frequency that keeps speaking to the field, even after you've gone silent. And it's exactly at this next stage that everything is revealed, the moment when you stop producing sound and become the silence that holds it. This is the final stage, and it's here that the truth of who you are begins to emerge for the first time. And it's exactly here that everything truly begins to change. Because after so many stages, conscious breathing, aligned centers, the sound spoken with intention and the field activated, something unexpected happens. You realize you no longer need to chant, not out of forgetfulness, not out of fatigue, but because the sound has evolved. Except it hasn't vanished. It has deepened. It has moved into a more internal, more subtle, more essential plane. Ancient traditions called this transition point the dissolution of the wave, when the outer sound completes its function and transmutes into a state of being. It's as if the echo no longer depends on air to move and begins to resonate directly in the field, invisible, uninterrupted, unmistakable. The chant now lives inside you, not as a memory, but as a pulse. You sit, not because you need to follow a protocol, but because your body naturally wants to be still. The breath slows, the shoulders relax, the eyes close, and in that exact moment, you realize the sound is still there. But it no longer needs your voice. It pulses in the center of your chest, resonates in your abdomen, radiates through your forehead. And that silent resonance isn't confined to your body. It emanates through the edges of your field. It is felt by others even without words. It is sensed by animals, plants, spaces. It changes the atmosphere of wherever you are. This is the inner chant, the moment when you didn't just emit a frequency, you became the frequency. And this isn't a metaphor. It's literal, experientially real. Your body now works as a living resonance chamber. Your field resonates like a continuous tone, tuned to the point of origin. Nothing needs to be said because your presence says it all. Ancient tradition said, when the sound dissolves into silence, it means it has returned to the house of the all. And the house of the all is the 0 point, the void that contains all possibilities, the original silence from which all resonance emerges. This is where you begin to live in a new state where seeking elevation is no longer necessary because you have become the elevation itself. You are no longer trying to hold a frequency. You are the sustained frequency, and everything around you begins to respond to that with mysterious naturalness. People start behaving in more aligned ways. Paths that were once closed become viable. What was stuck flows, but not because you did something, but because you stopped interfering. You allowed the inner sound to take the lead. This state is more than a meditation practice. It's an existential shift. The chant became field. The technique became essence. The effort became presence. And now every step you take carries that emission. But don't confuse this point with the end. It's exactly here that the most reserved practice begins to approach. The true awareness closure can't be performed by someone still trying to prove something. It only reveals itself to those who have already dissolved into silence. And that silence is the key to the final practice, the deepest stage of all. And it cannot be initiated by rush, expectation, or the desire to control. It only happens when the resonance becomes natural, when you resonate effortlessly, without intention, without expecting anything in return. And when that happens, the practice reveals itself. And that is what will be revealed next. And it's exactly because you access this internal resonant silence, pure, stable, self-sustaining, that now you are ready for the most subtle of all practices, but also the most revealing, the most intimate, the one that no longer depends on stimulation, but on surrender. That doesn't need technique, but presence. From this point forward, there is no more effort. Nothing needs to be achieved. You no longer need to seek the frequency, because now it is with you. And more than that, it is you. Sit calmly with your spine upright but without tension. No tightness in your shoulders, face, or hands. Let everything go. No expectation should be carried. Just be here. The field has already been prepared. The resonance has already been activated, and now it's time to allow. Let your breath return to the triangular rhythm that guided you here. Inhale, hold, exhale, and repeat slowly, without force or control. Let the body find its own rhythm, as if it were listening to itself breathe for the first time. And when the last echo of the silent sound disperses in the inner space, the practice begins, not with a gesture, not with a sound, but with silence. A silence that isn't absence. It is fullness. And it's within that silence that you'll notice something extraordinary. The field begins to move, to respond, to emit back what you emitted, but in a new way, transformed. This is the moment when the 0 point manifests not as a concept, but as a living state within you. A center of awareness intelligence that once accessed responds, but it only responds to those who have learned how to listen. Ancient traditions used to say that at this stage the practitioner no longer speaks with words. They speak with resonance, and that's why now you're going to allow a question to rise. But pay attention. It doesn't come from the mind. It's not a thought. It forms in the field as if sprouting from silence. The question is simple. What wants to emerge now? And when you ask this, you're not waiting for an answer in the usual way. You're not interrogating the universe. You're inviting. This question doesn't demand, it opens, it creates an internal space, and then it waits. It's in this space that the field begins to respond, sometimes with a memory, other times with a sensation in the body, an emotion, a sudden insight, a word that comes out of nowhere, or simply a peace so deep that you feel something has been completed, even if you don't understand what. This isn't imagination, it's the field returning. It's the resonance echoing back into your center. And when that happens, you're no longer doing a practice. You're establishing a dialogue with the invisible. A dialogue that doesn't depend on language or logic or expectation. The 0 point becomes a quantum mirror, a portal, where everything that is out of alignment shows itself clearly, but without judgment, without drama, without rejection. You simply see. And in seeing, you begin to integrate. Many, when they reach this point, report that old hurts they thought were long gone re-emerge gently and dissolve. Others say that memories they carried with emotional weight suddenly feel neutral, as if they'd been heard for the first time, and that's exactly what's happening. Your soul no longer needs you to shout to be heard, it just needed you to listen. And now you are listening, in silence, in the absolute now, with no mental noise, no emotional filter. And it's in this state that the insights begin to arrive without effort, without control, without agenda. Because here you've stopped resisting, and when resistance disappears, the field aligns. This is how ancient masters accessed forgotten wisdoms, deep healings, and decisions that changed everything. Not because they knew more, but because they resonated in silence with the hidden center of being. Now you've entered that center, and that has a consequence, because this space where you are is not just any awareness space. It's a hidden frequency domain, accessed by only a few consciousnesses who manage to pass through the layers of doing and arrive at pure being. This field can't be forced. It only opens when it recognizes. And now it has recognized you. And now that this field has recognized you, there's no going back. Something has been triggered in your most subtle core. And this activation cannot be undone because what happened here wasn't just a vocal exercise or a sequence of sacred breaths. It was a crossing, a moment of reunion between you and the forgotten part of yourself. An awareness trace that had been dormant like a silent flame waiting for the breath of remembrance. You didn't perform a technique, you crossed a threshold, and in that crossing something opened, a channel, a frequency. This frequency is not metaphorical. It pulses, it resonates, it breathes in you, as if a second heart had awakened, not to pump blood, but to radiate essence, a hidden awareness center that resonates beneath the skin, beyond the mind, far beyond the identity you used to carry. You breathed, you chanted, you went silent, and you asked. But the answer that came didn't arrive in words or images. It didn't scream. It didn't explain. It didn't translate itself. It simply settled in as a state of being, a continuous field of awareness coherence that now accompanies you effortlessly. And that's why from this point on, you no longer need to try to resonate highly. That search has dissolved because you became the frequency. It lives in you like the air that goes in and out, like the sound that no longer needs to be spoken to be felt, like the presence that silently changes everything around you. And you'll notice, almost imperceptibly, people start looking at you differently. They don't know what changed, but they feel it. Places that used to drain your energy now soften when you arrive. Conversations that used to be blocked flow with ease. Old patterns dissolve. Reality starts to give way, opening paths as if something invisible were reorganizing everything based on what you are. Not what you say or want, but what you resonate in silence. Not because you're trying to make it happen, but because you became it. The ancient chant is no longer on your lips. It no longer needs sound. It's been converted into awareness identity. And that identity begins to reprogram everything that's not coherent with it. Old habits lose power, masks dissolve, certain connections end without conflict, and whatever no longer resonates with your frequency simply doesn't stay. Not from judgment, but from natural resonance mismatch. It's as if your soul, now visible to the field, were clearing the path ahead of you. And even if you want to explain this to someone, you'll realize the words won't reach, because this isn't something to be understood. It's something to be lived. And this something now shows itself in everything, in your gaze, in your silence, in your step, in your touch. You emanate what you've always been seeking, not through effort, not through techniques, but through truth, because you are no longer the same. And even if the outside world seems unchanged, it starts responding to your new frequency as if it somehow recognizes that something sacred now moves with you. And the deepest part is that this resonance doesn't need to be used as power. It is a state, a presence, a truth that can no longer be undone. You now carry a sound that can't be heard with the ears, a sound that can't be seen, but that is felt by the soul. You are that sound, you are that field. And wherever you are, that resonance will be present, not as magic, but as testimony, as a seal, as a memory of the divine within you that is finally awakened. You're no longer practicing something. You've become what you were practicing. And now, even the universe begins to tune its melody to harmonize with you. If you've made it this far, you're already resonating differently. So leave it in the comments. I'm the sound that transforms. This phrase isn't just a comment. It's an awareness code that anchors everything you activated in this practice. And I really want to read about your experience, because each person feels this sound in their own unique way. And if you want to help the channel more directly, there's a way to contribute in the pinned comment to help spread more content like this out there. Your help makes this message resonate even farther. Now don't leave just yet. A special video was chosen to complete this awareness journey. It's already showing up on the screen. Click to meet me there and go even deeper into the frequency you've just begun to awaken here.